Welcome to the Happy Mindset, episode number 91. Today's episode is called Programming Your Computer. So today I'm going to talk around three key things that I've learned from computer science, from studying computer programming, that's helped me to understand how my brain operates a bit better. First thing I'm going to talk about is garbage in, garbage out. This is something that I heard years ago, and it's something that I actually took to heart and internalized. So when I heard this, like in computer programming, it's basically what you put into the program is going to come out of the program. There's no real denying that. So that's what I like about coding. It's not very subjective in its detail. So it either works or it doesn't. And that's what I like about coding. So the garbage in, garbage out was something that I started to think about in my own life too. I started thinking about it in terms of my mind and my brain and what am I feeding it on a day-to-day basis. Because what goes in is going to come out. So just having that, it's a shortcut in my brain. So I just think of that whenever I am feeling out of balance or out of whack. It helps me to become more intentional just with my day, with the books I'm reading, with the people I'm around, the interactions I'm having, and how I think about myself. And it's it helps me to actually be conscious of how I'm thinking about myself. Because if I'm thinking about myself in a way that isn't constructive or isn't real with myself, then I'm not going to get those results, and that's the results that I want. My goal in life is to be as real and as open as possible as a person. That's where I feel the most free in my mind and in my heart and the way I'm being. So that's my ultimate goal in life, is to follow that path. So if I'm not doing things that align with that, then I won't get those results. Again, actually, if you think about it, that's completely within your control. Not everything's within your control in the world. The real world acts in its own way sometimes, in weird and wonderful ways, and you have to adjust accordingly and trying to figure out what works. But there's a few things that are actually within your control, and it is how you choose to grow as a person. So if you have that goal in mind that you want to be a real and open and honest person with yourself, then that's possible because that's completely within your control. When it comes to being honest too, that's something I struggled with growing up, because I guess as a child I kind of like viewed honesty in a way of like, I viewed it more in a sense of being honest with other people so that I'm seen as an honest person. So it was a very childish approach. I was a child, and it was never great because it honestly didn't feel actually that great to me. It just felt like it was something I had to do to please other people. Whereas in the real world, what I found from growing up and developing into an adult is that being real and honest with yourself, it's not easy, but it's about being honest with yourself. It's not about the other people per se. It's not about that. That will change as well as you become more real and more open and more honest. You will start attracting more of those types of people into your life over time. You just won't resonate with people who are not on those wavelengths as much. And that's a goal worth in my opinion, that's a goal worth striving for. And that comes into the garbage in, garbage out. So if I'm surrounding myself with stuff that's bullshit or that isn't in alignment with reality, then there will be a huge disconnect in my life. So my goal in life is to narrow the gaps between my results and how I think about things. And that's been beneficial to me, to have that shortcut in my mind about garbage in, garbage out. Keeps me on track. The next thing, what was the other thing? Today, actually, I have some bullet points for a change. Maybe I'm learning to. I'm kind of finding the balance. I think it's good to have no notes. Sometimes it's also good to have a little bit of structure as well. So I kind of just play and experiment with this because just my podcast and I can do that. That's why I created this. The second tip is infinite loops are not permanent. So there's a thing in computer programming. Looping is a very common concept. When you think about it in terms of 80-20, it's the loops. If you're going to learn computer programming in the morning, look at the mastering the for loop. In Python especially, the for loop is used an awful lot. It's even used a lot more than the while loop. But anyway, a loop is basically you're looping through a program. So let me think of it in a simple way. So for example, just say I hate using the word X. I prefer in programming to use something that actually describes what's being said. So actually when you go reading a book and you see foo and bar and all these kind of abstract concepts, they're not really helpful. What's helpful is that if you use words to describe what you're doing, so say for example you're counting the shoes in a shoebox, you say for shoe in shoebox, print shoe. So you're printing you're returning one shoe from the shoebox each time, so you're just printing it. Or you can calculate how many shoes are in the shoebox by that. For shoe in shoebox, you can go shoe, what's it, +1 or something like that. But it's great to be descriptive, because somebody reading that then will look at that and they go, okay, yeah, he's counting shoes in a shoebox, rather than it being for foo in bar. It's like, what the hell is foo in bar? It doesn't make any sense. So you're at a loss, you're at a struggle straight away when you've got abstract terms that don't make any sense in the real world. That's a bit of a tangent. That's a bit of a computer science tangent. It's just I've been lucky, I guess. I had a teacher who taught me about this when I came into computer programming, that he taught me that it's important to label things in such a way that other people will understand them. So you've got that, you're thinking about other people, not just yourself. It's a bit of it's even showing that you're a good team person, that you're able to think about things in that way. So anyway, the infinite loop, sometimes in programming, you'll write something wrong, you'll write the condition wrong, the logic will be wrong, and the loop will never break. So it's just an infinite loop, and that actually, it just never breaks. So I like to think that in terms of the loops that my brain can go into, these thought patterns that I can get stuck in, about thought patterns of like how I think about myself, and thought patterns around what results I think is possible for me. So there's always these types of thought patterns in my life. What I've realized over time is that you can break out of those infinite loops. They're not permanent if you have the curiosity, if you've got the grit as well, and the determination. But curiosity is key as well. Like, the grit and determination will only get you so far. It won't actually get you out of the loop. So when I'm looking at the code, I'm realizing that it's a human mind that's created this code. So there's a human mind. I kind of look at it as like, we have a tendency to get into these infinite loops about thinking about ourselves in such a certain way that it limits us off from a lot of different opportunities. I experienced that in my life, and I go through the process of breaking through those loops to get different results and to try new things and to push myself outside my comfort zone. So in the code as well, I can see objectively you can actually break the loop as well. Either you write the logic correctly, or there's also a break statement as well, which you can actually use to break out of the loop. So that's the parallel I draw from coding, because coding comes from the mind of a human being. It's very logical, it's very rational, it has to be. That's the nature of it. And that gives me like a more of a confidence in the fact that it's these loops that you're caught up in, rather than it being an aspect of just who you are and limiting that. So you get a feel for that in the real world yourself, but it's just useful to keep in mind. I found it useful to keep in mind that anything that I'm stuck in right now is impermanent. I can get through it. A lot of the time as humans, it's emotions we're trapped in, and just these kind of paralyzing and overwhelming emotions, shame, embarrassment, fear, there'll be the undercurrents to it. Oftentimes I found it's actually moving through the emotion gets you out of it, even though it's the last thing you want to do. And it's not even that easy to do, because it's not like you can just decide, okay, now I'm going to feel it all. It doesn't actually play out like that in the real world. You can set the intention that you're going to move through this fear and move through this anxiety, but you don't actually get, well, in my experience, you don't actually get to say exactly how you're going to do that or how it's going to turn out in the real world. You got a lot of the fear and uncertainty and anxiety comes from dealing with other people and their opinions of you, and you don't know how, you can't control any of that, and you don't know when they're going to change their mind on things, or how they're going to perceive you, or how they're going to hear what you're saying. So there's a lot of it outside your control, so you don't really know how you're going to move through the emotion, but you can set the intention, which is that's the logical, rational part that I learned from code, that you can set the intention. So in coding, you can either choose to debug a program. By doing that, you realize this is going to take some time. I don't know if I'm going to definitely get to the root cause of this. It's going to take a lot of research, a lot of time on my part. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you can get lucky and you can figure it out quite quickly. Other times it can take a long time. Other times still, you might need some help from somebody else to talk it out and get a different perspective. That's like the real world. That's how you move through things in the real world as well. So that's the infinite loops. And then the third and final thing I want to talk about is my note. You can program your brain in the same way you program a computer, which is the title of this podcast. So for me, like, computers are basically, they're super brains in in the sense that they can analyze things a lot quicker than us and a lot more accurately. They're a lot more precise than us. But we, as humans, created them. So what I like to do is to think about the fact that when I'm programming something, what am I doing it for? Like, I'm doing it to automate a task which will make life easier for myself and other people, which frees up my thinking to focus on more creative tasks and more tasks which are more meaningful. So you automate a lot of the boring stuff, a lot of the monotonous stuff, a lot of the soul wrenching stuff. And so you can apply the same thing to your brain. As in, I used to never think of my brain as a computer. And it's funny because when I'm talking about this, there can be a certain perception that when you talk about your brain as a computer, you just feel like, oh, you're dehumanizing somebody. But actually, I found the counterintuitive thing is that when you start to see your brain as something that you can program and something you can make work for you, it actually objectifies the patterns you get stuck into. As you start seeing that that's your brain's patterns, that maybe there was a program in there that you got stuck in, you didn't realize you got in there, but now you've objectively got the chance to reprogram what you've gotten yourself into. Because otherwise the only alternative is to actually be stuck in those patterns because you don't believe that you can change them and like reprogram what's going on there. So the way I look at it is that my brain is a computer that I can program to focus on what I want for my life. So it's a simple thing. It's not like I'm going in there and writing complex code or algorithms or anything. When I talk about in terms of your brain, I'm just talking about in terms of the questions you're asking yourself. What are you focusing on? So like, what are you looking at? Like, when I didn't think of my computer or my brain as a computer, I didn't think about it to begin with. And if I did think about it, it would have just been like, I would have thought about it as like a camcorder. So I'm just like looking at the world through it and I'm just taking in information and I'm making some sort of sense from it. And that's about it. But I didn't think about the fact that like my brain, I can train it to focus on what I wanted to focus on through discipline, through asking intentional questions. So I don't always get this right because I'm human with emotions and I'm not always feeling great, but I'm aware of that too, that I don't always have to feel great to do stuff. And that keeps me to be more consistent than I would otherwise be. And so that's a simple principle. So like when I think of my brain as a computer, I think of it as like, I start seeing it too, that it's my brain that's reacting to stuff that I don't want it to react to, and it's not me. So that way it helps me to realize that I can change the pattern, I can change the stuff I'm stuck in. Like, it's very frustrating to be stuck in a pattern with certain types of people that you don't want to be in, but yet you can't seem to pull yourself away from. It's like that thing where like you're just focusing on the negative stuff and it somehow it feels good in a weird way and you can't pull yourself away from it and just get logical with yourself. You can't reason with yourself and just take the higher ground and just move forward yourself. So what I'm doing here with the thinking of my brain as a computer, I don't really think about it all the time like that. It's just a parallel I see between computer science programming and this, because that's how I'm interested in programming computer science today. Because I see the parallels between the human mind, psychology, and it really interests me then to get better at computer programming. That's my natural buy-in, that's my motivation, that's my why for learning computer science, because I want to understand how to create things in the world, and I also want to understand my brain better and my mind better. And so that's what gives me, computer programming gives me that every day. It gives me an opportunity to learn a bit more about that. And so the more I can do this, the more I can actually get at the human underneath the brain that's being triggered by a load of stuff. So yeah, I guess you get to the understanding that like when you start reflecting on it, like who am I? Like, am I my brain? Am I my head? Am I my body? Am I whatever? There's no right or wrong answers to this. It's just reflecting on it. Who am I? And so like when you start seeing your brain as something that you can be more intentional with, that's all it is. You're not trying to control your brain. You're not trying to force anything. You're just trying to be more intentional with it and be more self-aware with it, so that you know what's going on, and you realize that you also have a choice in choosing the direction of how things are going to play out. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. There are 3 key things that I've learned from computer programming that I apply back to psychology and understanding my brain and how I work. That is a tip in itself. Just whenever you learn something new, see how you can tie it back to something you're most interested in. I would say psychology has always been the thing I've been most interested in. Even with languages, I've been thinking about in terms of psychology and communication for a long time. It's just I didn't realize that that's what I was doing. So psychology has been like an undercurrent to everything I do, as well as language. Language is like the other undercurrent to everything I do, and they kind of interact with each other, as well as the language and psychology. And so that's basically it today. I just wanted to share some thoughts because they've been very beneficial in my life to think about things in these ways. And hope you got some value from today. And thanks for listening, and I will see you on the next episode.